Good day and welcome to day 2 and session 2 of the online workshop on effective public governance and finance for disaster risk reduction, local resilience, and climate action. My name is Haegyong Shelley Choi, and I'm a Senior Program Management Assistant at the United Nations Project Office on Governance of UNDESA. I am based in Incheon, Republic of Korea. It is my great honor to be your moderator today. I would like to thank you all for your active and lively participation yesterday. As we really want to continue this engaging connection with you, I think it would be good to get to know each other a bit. Please open up the chat and share your name and where you are joining from and your organization. Hello, Chris from Nigeria. It's wonderful to have you. Hello, Hitesh from Nepal, UNOPS. It's really wonderful to see you. I see Clara joining from South Africa. This is really amazing to see the whole global community come together to be inspired by the insights of our speakers and the experiences of our participants. Today, we will focus on effective governance and institutional arrangements for synergistic climate action, resilience, and sustainable development. Today's session includes 2 parts. The first part will focus on institutional arrangements for synergistic climate action. We will start with a setting the scene session, followed by an expert presentation. After the Q&A session, we will move into an interactive activity on capacity gaps assessment. The second part will focus on enabling efficient and effective policy processes. The presentation will be followed by an interactive activity on scoring and assessing horizontal policy interactions with the SDG synergies. After the break, we will return to hear a presentation on the Climate Readiness Assessment tool. And then we will move into an engaging activity to learn how to apply the tool. We have an extraordinary lineup of speakers today. I am pleased to introduce to you my colleague, Ms. Anna Thorland. She is the Governance and Public Administration Expert with the United Nations Project Office on Governance, which is part of DPIDG of UNDESA. Ms. Thorland supports member states in enhancing their capabilities in risk-informed governance, climate action, AI, and digital transformation to advance the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Next, I have the greatest pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Adis Zibo. He is a senior research fellow at the Stockholm Environment Institute. He has worked extensively on aligning global agendas and integrating climate action with sustainable development priorities at both global and domestic levels. Dr. Zibo is also the lead author of UNDESA's toolkit on strengthening public institutions for climate action through institutional capacity building, strategic foresight, and digital transformation. We're very honored to have Dr. Zibo with us today. Before we delve into the session, I would like to give you a quick reminder. You can opt for a certificate upon successful completion and meeting all the requirements of the workshop. Remember, you have to actively participate in the 3 sessions. You can ask questions, add comments, share your experiences using the chat function. Without further ado, let me give the floor to our speakers, Ms. Anna Thorland, Governance and Public Administration Expert of UNPOG, and Dr. Adis Zibo, Research Fellow at SEI. Ms. Anna Thorland, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shelley. Thank you for your nice introduction and welcome everyone for day 2. It is my pleasure to introduce you. First of all, if my colleague can, yes, move to the next slide. Our session, it's about synergetic approaches to climate action and sustainable development. And next slide, please. I have an issue with my slides. 1 second. One second here. Thank you. And the first, yeah. So the first slide, it's about the new toolkit we have available for government officials that will be released very soon. And we are glad to inform you that how this toolkit comes into development. First of all, there is the CEPA, which is the Committee of Experts on Public Administration, who make an analysis in their session 2 years ago on how climate action is not necessarily solely mandate for one ministry. It should be for different ministries. And they found out in their paper that there is many lack of institutional capacity. So therefore, that we came up with some ideas, and then the stock take of 2020 in the 28th COP, the global stock take of the climate action in the COPs, they discuss a lot of the need of institutional building capacity. So UNDESA, together with the Institute, Stockholm Environment Institute, developed the toolkit in order to bridge these capacity gaps. Next one, please. One second. Mm. Yes, thank you. We have 5 units in the toolkit. The first unit will be about effective governance for sustainable development and climate action. The second one, well, this is a course introduction where we are going to look the building blocks of the whole toolkit. The second one is about institutional arrangement for synergetic climate action. And here we are looking, and that's what we're going to discuss more today. We're going to look at the institutional capacity building, the policy coordination, and the stakeholder engagement. And also today we're going to pilot somehow the toolkit because we're going to look also at module 2.2 on enable efficient and effective policy processes. Then this unit 2 is quite long because they have 5 modules. One module also is on the vertical dimension of synergistic climate action. And module 2.4 is about monitoring and evaluation for effective policy. Unit 3, we have a new unit here. It's about strategic foresight in public institutions to combat climate change. So this is a very new unit because what we want to bring as knowledge to governments officials is how they can incorporate strategic foresight and anticipatory governance for climate action. That's the fourth one, sorry, is about artificial intelligence and digital transformation for agile public institutions. So all what about digital transformation, infrastructure for climate action. And this is also very much aligned with the quintet of change of the UN 2.0. So we try to bring data and AI and transformation into the climate environment ecosystem. And the last one is the development of an integrated action plan. Next one, please. Thank you. So our toolkit is developed around 3 building blocks. The first one is about effective policy implementation, coordination. The second one is coherence, and the third one is on integration. And this is also built on which draws on the Committee of Experts on Public Administration I mentioned before. They also have developed the principles for good governance. In fact, it's the principles for effective governance for sustainable development. So based on these principles, we try to bring the strategic perspective for building the building blocks for coordination, coherence, and integration. And this will elaborate the synergistic approach to policymaking to minimize the trade-off and deliver successful processes and outcomes for climate action. So let's start from the beginning. Next one, please. So we have already since 2015, and we discussed yesterday quite a lot about the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. And today we're going to cover two aspects, more on the Paris Agreement and also on the Sustainable Development Goals, how these interact, and how we have to look at the synergies between the SDGs and the Paris Agreement. So the national determinate contributions, as well as the 17 SDGs, are universal, applicable, and global in their ambitions, and almost all countries have committed to achieving the global goals on climate and sustainable development. So both agendas agreed in 2015, and both are universally adopted. Also, both agendas, the Paris Agreement and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, has been made through a bottom-up process and consultations with member states who then decide themselves how to implement them. So in their NDCs and the sustainable development strategies, that depends on your national needs and capacities. Next one, please. So just a few reminders for us as agreed in COP21 in Paris in 2015. The principles of the Paris Agreement are universally fairness and inclusiveness, and a joint responsibility of member states for the monitoring and review. The Article 2 of the Paris Agreements includes an overarching goals on mitigation, adaptation, and financing. Mitigation, the global peaking of GHG emissions as soon as possible, and a target of emissions neutrality in the second half of the century. For the national determinate contributions, all parties to put determined contributions. So this is every country. And also there is one specific aspect on enhancing transparency of the framework for action and support, which includes requirements that all parties report regularly on their emissions and implementation efforts. Also, as mentioned before, a global stocktake is conducted every 5 years to assess the collective progress toward achieving the agreement's purpose and inform further individual actions. Next one, please. Here is the timeline, how it went for the national determined contributions, which are countries' climate action plans. For example, these can be documents that translate the Paris Agreement into national implementation. And this is not started in 2015, but well ahead of 2015. Next one, please. Regarding the Sustainable Development Goals, they did not start on 2015. This is a long process, and the SDGs were developed as a successory of the Millennium Development Goals in the Rio, many of you maybe remember, of the Rio Plus 20 process, which were inclusive and participatory. Also, this is a process where NGOs, the citizens, the companies, and the private sector had an opportunity to influence the development of the agenda and to help formulate the goals. So that's how it was developed, the 2030 agenda. And plus, it has emerged as a part of a global negotiation process that has been unique in its form, as well as providing a vision for sustainable development for the global south and the global north, but also means that the implementation of the goals is at the national level. It depends on your context, and it differs significantly and depends on the local conditions. Next one, please. Very important are the principles, the people of the Sustainable Development Goals. So we want to end poverty and hunger in all their forms and dimensions, and to ensure that all human beings can fulfill their potential in dignity, equality, and in healthy environment. The planet, we want to protect the planet for degradation, including through sustainable consumption and production. Prosperity, that ensures that all human beings can enjoy prosperous and fulfilling life. The peace, which foster peaceful, just, and inclusive societies, which are free from fear and violence. And the partnerships mobilize the means required to implement this agenda. Next one, please. So as the 2030 agenda enters in the 10 years of implementation, we have seen the reports of the progress by the Secretary General this year, the 2025. And these reports underscore the urgent need for decisive action to really stay on the course because of the 137 targets with available data, only 35 are on track or showing moderate data progress. But the problem is that we have 47% that are advancing very slow in the targets comparing to the baseline of 2015. And 18% has regressed compared to the 2015 baseline. So with 5 years to remaining until 2030 deadline, the reports reinforce the pressing need to accelerate efforts and reverse these negative trends. But also for those who are in Asia and Pacific, which Asia Pacific is home for 60% of the global population, it plays a pivotal role in achieving the SDGs. And despite being a hub of economy, dynamism, and innovation, the region faced significantly challenges. And we heard yesterday about disasters and disaster triggered by natural hazards. The ESCAP Asia report on SDGs specifically is sharing alarmingly how much the SDG 13 is regressing. And however, there is also slow achievement of the 17, slow progress, we can say, of the 17 SDGs by 2030. So what is the key message I want to share in this slide is that we have to engage with communities and in order to close these data gaps. When there is not notable progress has been made in many areas, such as innovation, infrastructure, and good health, we still have and persist several goals on regressing. And two specifically I wanted to remind is also not only the 13, but also SDG 16, which is the SDGs for strong institutions, strong, effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions. Next one, please. Well, this is a little summary of where we are with the 2030 agenda, which I just shared before, the slow progress and the urgent need to accelerate the action. Next one, please. So here, I go back to the climate, specifically on the progress of the Paris Agreement and how this is happening. And we have the IPCC Report 6, which had projected, and this is quite important for everyone, that global emissions announced ahead of COP26 would make it likely that the warming will exceed 1.5 and also make it harder after the 2030 to limit this warming to below 2.0. And and you're very well aware, and if not today, you're going to be aware that last year we are already passing by little, but we are already overpassing the 1.5 Celsius degrees. But for our humanity, it's very important to keep in the 1.5 degrees as a possibility. Requires that 43% reduction goes by 2030. And next one, please. Enabling climate resilient development. It's very important because rapidly narrowing window of opportunity to enable climate resilient development, and the multiple interactive choices can shift development to sustainability, which is that's what we want to achieve. And there are conditions that enables this sustainability. For example, the inclusive governance, the diverse knowledge and values, the finance and innovation. And the behavioral science is very important to enable conditions for this sustainability to happen. But we have constraints like the poverty, the siloed responses, and the lack of finance. I think I will give the floor now to my colleague Adis to follow up a little bit more on the synergistic implementation of SDGs and the Paris Agreement. Over to you, Adis.
So, thank you, Anna. I hope everybody can hear me. All right, let's quickly start. So hi, everybody. My name is Adis Zebo, and as Shelley introduced me this morning, I work for the Stockholm Environment Institute, but I have been working with UMPOG on developing this toolkit over the past few months. But before I start, I just wanted to see if we can manage this technical challenge and see if I can share my screen somehow. Let's see. There.
You're showing the Mentimeter.
Yeah. Do you see the screen?
Yes, we do. But are you showing the Mentimeter?
Yeah. Yes, I am. And it's not showing, or
It is. It is.
yeah. Good. All right. Excellent. So it would be great just to kind of take the little bit of temperature on who participates in the room and a little bit on kind of what your experiences are with the both DRR and climate action, and also a little bit around barriers and enablers. It will be a short session, and yeah, you see the link to the Mentimeter up there at the top. It would be great if you go in and answer. Great. And yeah, during the time, I will also explain a little bit on the kind of session. So the focus will be on the capacity building and going a little bit over, spilling into stakeholder engagement and what is the role of kind of gap assessments and estimating, enabling factors and barriers on policy implementation and policy coherence for the first session, and then we will go into kind of like a semi-interactive session that builds on the tool, but the tool is more designed for kind of for a smaller setting. So we will just have a kind of some smaller excerpts of the group activities that we're going to engage in. And then, as Anna explained, the tool itself is much bigger, running over 5 modules, and we will only kind of touch upon a couple of units within one module here that focus specifically on policy coherence, policy interactions, and so on. Great. Let's see if I can go to the next question, which is basically a word cloud. And here I would, yeah, if you just try to use as few words as possible, preferably just one around in the context where you work. What do you see the kind of biggest barrier to enabling effective climate action? And we'll give it around 1-2 minutes. Great, I see coordination. I also see that there are both kind of the traditional institutional elements, but also the role of politics and interests and so on. So some of these, both of these areas is something we're going to touch upon later. And then let's quickly go over to the next question, which is focuses on the second topic of this workshop, on the disaster risk reduction and similar type of questions are where are the where are the barriers to effective disaster risk reduction governance in your own context? It would be interesting for us later to see how do they differ and what is their relationship and so on. But yeah, I guess one could expect that it would be pretty similar type of challenges. Also see funding, classical challenge. Hopefully something we can touch upon later in the session as well. Thanks. I'll see if I can stop sharing and then go into the presentation. We will work a little bit, go back to the Mentimeter in a while. But let's see, Shelley, can we open the slide?
16, where synergies starts. Thank you. I didn't cover yet the 16, Addis.
Yeah, can we go to the next one then? Yeah, thanks, Anna. This was exactly just a kind of short introduction to how do we approach policy interactions and policy coherence and what are the kind of what is the key terminology around it, emphasizing the kind of synergies, which are circumstances where progress towards one objective boosts progress on other. Similarly, co-benefits are more unintended positive side effects from implementation, while trade-offs is kind of a counterpoint to synergy, whereas making progress on one objective makes it more difficult to achieve one of or several other objectives, while a conflict is kind of goes into direct opposition to other goals, where making progress on one makes it more or less cancels out the ability to make progress on one or other objectives. I think there is one more text box here. Shelley, can you go to the next? Yeah, this is more kind of the buffer and multiplier is more kind of like a second level emphasis on how one goal can boost progress on one or on several other objectives, kind of acting as a multiplier, and similarly on as a buffer, where kind of preventing or blocking progress to one or multiple policy objectives. All right, go to the next slide. Yeah, and much of the focus in the toolkit and that the presentation is going to focus on will be on taking the kind of perspective of the climate and SDGs, which has been the area that I've worked a lot on, and the one where we kind of really started exploring broader level interactions between these high level global agendas. And this slide is from the NDC SDG connections that shows how kind of extrapolation of countries' statements in the NDCs showing more or less policy objectives or intentions, showing that there is a strong overlap between climate action and more or less all of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Can we go to the next slide? Similarly, the tool, the NDCSU connection, breaks the information down at the goal level as well, where you can go and explore the kind of the relative importance of different targets, where the emphasis is also that even if there is a strong connection, it doesn't mean that there's a connection across all goals and targets, but where there are some that are more relevant for climate action than others. Can we go to the next slide? And yeah, the overall kind of taking a step back and looking at broader picture around global synergies and trade-offs between climate change and sustainable development. There's been kind of a strong discourse or framing around quite a strong emphasis on there being synergies and co-benefits between these two. Although one of the most recent papers shows that at least in some of the goals we're starting to kind of get a little bit of a shift around what the potential of synergistic implementation, and these are particularly the environmental SDGs, so land degradation, oceans, and so on. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah. So basically, that will be kind of the close wrap up of the first section, and going into the kind of institutional level, where the focus will be on capacity building, on policy coordination, and on stakeholder engagement. So let's go over to the next slide. Yeah. So then going from the kind of perception or assumption that there are kind of strong synergies waiting to be implemented by countries when they are implementing both the kind of SDGs and the Sendai framework and the Paris Agreement, that code benefits are kind of there to be taken as, or to be seen as low-hanging fruit. And while there are some, but overall there is a kind of more of a realization around the challenges that public institutions are facing, and emerging pressures from climate change and economic, social, and environmental risks that are increasing as a consequence, where we're kind of more realizing the difficulty of realizing these global synergies into national implementation, and two broader kind of areas of explanation on what the barriers are the institutional and political barriers. So these are something that we're going to discuss, and also focus a little bit on the strategy for overcoming these. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, but one of the key kind of issues are the contextual barriers, and I think this is well explained in this figure, which comes from the most recent IPCC chapter. I think it's the chapter on mitigation that emphasizes the kind of different contexts that countries are faced with when implementing their global commitments. And I saw in the chat someone writing about South Sudan, and obviously a country like South Sudan has a much different starting point, different context, different opportunities to implement these global agendas than a country such as Germany or United States. And despite, so the one aspect is that the fact that there is different contexts and different starting points, but also the second one is that there is no country that is yet within that corridor. So basically for us to be able to achieve our global commitments means that all countries in all regions need to end up in that bottom right corner. So then if we look at the policies and the targets that are being set both in these agreements and also how they're interpreted nationally, is that they are overall largely synergistic, but that when they are being implemented, we see that there are issues in implementation where incoherence arises. So can we go to the next slide? Yeah, so as Anna introduced the kind of three core building blocks of the toolkit, the policy coordination, coherence, and integration, the kind of first step or the first level to start working, start thinking about these kind of synergistic implementation is the importance of policy coordination, which can be defined as a set of decisions coordinated if adjustments have been made in such that the adverse consequences of any one decision for other decisions are, to a degree, in some frequency, avoided, reduced, counterbalanced, or outweighed. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, this was also a couple of steps. Maybe press 2 more. Hey, thanks. One, thanks. Yeah, so a kind of core aspect to failure of poor implementation of the Paris Agreement and 2030 agenda can be seen in the kind of the fragmented knowledge dissemination, the kind of insufficient science policy interaction, in overlapping mandates that governments are dealing with poor coordination structures and incoherence in decision making and policy, as well as kind of the more kind of political level where the interests and ideas and public debates in a country are can either prevent or enable effective implementation. Next slide. Yeah, but going back to the coordination, it can be seen as a starting point for solving most policy problems of collective action. And what that means, or what that's kind of how that can be interpreted and operationalized. The focus is on kind of ensuring alignment across multi-sectoral objectives, both horizontally and vertically. It's around ensuring that the kind of internal hierarchies considered, for example, by making sure to get the powerful ministries on board at an early stage, but also around meaningful consultations with all engaged public institutions, but also stakeholders, and assigning and sharing roles and responsibilities across the policy cycle, so making sure to know when each and one will where each actor can contribute and why and how and so on. And of course, joint accountability with explicit mandates that enable coordination. We go to next slide. Yeah, and in terms of the kind of its operationalization, what to coordinate and how to coordinate, that can take place at a specific implementation level, so focusing on a specific policy, or it can be a more strategic directive from a whole of government perspective. There are kind of bottom-up or top-down approaches to coordination. Similarly, the negative or positive emphasizes the coordinate to avoid the worst expected outcomes, or coordinate to seek win-win solutions across different areas. Kind of another level is the horizontal coordination, which means between national public institutions, or vertical, where both local level and regional level and maybe even supranational level are being engaged, as well as the issue-specific and strategic coordination, where the focus can be on short-term solutions and problems, or kind of building long-term relationships without any kind of explicit short-term directive. And in terms of what enables it, or like what are the kind of how questions, it's around the importance of recognizing what the actual problem is, and a political acknowledgement of it, and agreeing for the need of coordination by the political leadership. There are different ways how coordination can take place. It can be around on hierarchical structure, where there are clear instructions and mandates, but also at a network level, where there is a more kind of negotiation between different public actors and public institutions that is driving coordination forward. Yeah, there are kind of different approaches, and they're being applied by different countries, where some create interinstitutional structures and mechanisms for coordination, and others can, for example, appoint a lead ministry or a lead agency to take charge of a specific coordination problem. Yeah, the kind of political coordinating body is one of these kind of core overarching elements where across institutional structures and mechanisms. So thanks. Sorry, next slide. Yeah, and just in terms of why is coordination important? I think this is one of my favorite examples on how kind of active coordination, vertical coordination between, this is a case of Brazil, where the government introduced a mandate for kind of the federal government with the states and the local level to establish a working group which had kind of a direct consequence on the reducing deforestation. And similarly, when that coordination group was disbanded, we can also see there in the chart to the right that the deforestation started increasing again. So there is this case shows a clear relationship between effective policy coordination and actual impact. Next slide. And in terms of, if we take a look at the barriers, what tends to prevent coordination, there are kind of both the political level issues and challenges around power, around beliefs and ideologies and party politics, but there's also the kind of flip side of that, where there are too specialized agencies and ministries that are uninterested in coordinating, the kind of lack of ownership, but also territorialism around protecting your own turf, and also the complexity of the specific issue, where kind of coordination is just too difficult to initiate, basically. All right, next slide. Yeah, I think this slide is just showing a few examples of why and how coordination is either preventing or supporting progress, but there is not a kind of a lack of coordination, as the first example on the top side shows that if there are two diverging actors who are forced to coordinate, there might be the outcome might not be by definition positive. So, and also the kind of the emphasis on the lack of the coordination and as a discourse around that when there are too many interests involved can be problematic, because it doesn't really shine a light on the political contestations that are happening within that problem. And in this case, it was around deforestation and both kind of different ideas and around conservation and economic development, and which emphasized the incompatibility between different land use objectives. So there was a kind of like the framing of poor coordination or lack of coordination was not being very helpful in that case, since the actors would not have succeeded, would not have had any interest to coordinate with each other anyway. But there is also other examples of where policy coordination can be a factor for not only improving implementation here at the regional level. So this is a case from the European Union, where the kind of regional coordination between countries contributed to not only improvement nationally, but also positive spillover effects from one country to another, and also supporting to prevent local or national vested interests from preventing or from creating a barrier to effective policy implementation. Next. Sorry. There. Yeah, apologies. I pressed the wrong button here. Yeah, in terms of then going towards the enabling factors for coordination, I think we touched upon some of these already, but the empowering a process of coordination and developing institutional champions has been found that where, despite governance officials' awareness of synergies and trade-offs between their issue areas, sometimes they would not choose to coordinate if there was no incentive or demand driving that process. So finding champions within various public institutions could be has been seen as a good, effective way to kind of illuminate and to emphasize them, to bring actors together by also ensuring accountability and commitment by here's the second example, emphasizes the performance-based indicators that target cross-sectoral coordination rather than being judged or assessed by kind of more fragmented or more siloed work tasks that government officials have. Another kind of enabling factor is the agreement timelines, and definitely, and especially the kind of separating timelines from the political cycle. So making sure that these coordination initiatives and coordination bodies can last between two different governments. And also finally, the kind of importance of focusing on process over outcomes, coordination about establishing a culture of communication and collaboration within public institutions rather than striving to kind of achieve some highly set short-term goals. Can we go to next slide? Yeah, I have a few slides on stakeholder engagement before we can go into Q&A, but one kind of core element of effective coordination is to make sure that stakeholders are engaged meaningfully and are participating in an inclusive way, which in turn creates more legitimate processes and more effective outcomes. It also requires commitment from stakeholders who are outside of the public institutions to have processes for engaging with these participants. Also requires knowledge and experience about local drivers that are important for specific localized problems, establishing a mutual understanding and understanding the need from affected communities and their needs to make sure that avoid the most kind of negative, the most adverse outcomes from policy implementation, which in turn supports more kind of stronger, more effective, and more reliable and legitimate policy processes. So can we go to next? Yeah, in terms of then who can be seen as a stakeholder, I think we have here's a definition from UNDESA that clearly kind of distinguishes individuals or representatives who formally constitute a group or organization that has a collective interest and can affect decisions and views and interests, or is affected by policy or action taken by herself or others that impact a specific policy implementation process. And there are various groups here that are emphasized. the kind of women and children, youth, and indigenous people, and non-governmental organizations and local authorities, trade associations and unions, and private sector more broadly, academia, and as well as kind of specific groups of professions, such as farmers or smallholder farmers, particularly in that case. Yep, we go over to the next slide, which illuminates a little bit the role of stakeholders in global climate action. And here are a few quotes from the NDC synthesis report, which really states the importance of stakeholder consultation and engagement from an NDC perspective, where almost all NDCs indicated that consultations were being done and engagement was inclusive during the preparation of the NDCs. Similarly, the global stocktake, which Anna referred to previously at the COP28, I think it was, where the assessment and the kind of mandate to accelerate implementation emphasizes that sustainable and just solutions to the climate crisis, they must be founded on meaningful and effective social dialogue and participation of all stakeholders, including indigenous people and local communities and governments and women and youth and children. Wait, go to next. So then, in terms of how to operationalize stakeholder engagement, there are 4 broad levels of engagement, which have different levels of engagement as well as different levels of empowerment, going from informing about a decision to consulting about specific actions that are being planned, to really kind of involve and seek input and gather feedback before making a specific decision, to the kind of finally the more kind of collaborative, where all stakeholders will have direct input on what will be decided and implemented and what wouldn't. So one key decision to take when engaging in stakeholder engagement is the kind of where on this chart does each decision or each policy warrant, what type of engagement is warranted by the decision needed. Thanks. Can you go to the next slide, Sherry? Yeah, and then also another important aspect is to make sure to engage the right stakeholders, where to reflect the kind of best practices around establishing a clear mandate, definition of the objective, roles and responsibilities internally, expectations on stakeholders before engagement, but also the kind of the process itself, where the format and for engagement and what tool will be applied. Will it be direct interaction? Will it be more kind of digital interaction? The resources, securing necessary resources to actually undertaking that, and making sure to manage expectations from that engagement. And then finally, the stakeholders themselves, to have a clear strategy on identifying the most relevant stakeholders, to make sure that it's a representative sample, and of course the kind of differences in resources and power of different stakeholders and their participation. So, for example, ensuring that it's not done during working hours, all meetings, that there are opportunities various times of the day, and that information is shared in different methods and different venues and different settings and so on. All right, next slide. So this would be the kind of the last one on benefits. So what are the kind of the benefits and pitfalls with stakeholder engagement, where the kind of the benefits of effective stakeholder engagement is that there will be stronger and better understanding of the consequences of the climate policies. So who will be affected the worst, who won't, how can implementation strategies anticipate these adverse outcomes to avoid some of them, but also around fairness towards vulnerable communities, and particularly indigenous communities, the kind of the democratic tradition of participation, the kind of potential antidotes to disinformation around specific policy or climate change more broadly, preserving the kind of the civic space for negotiation and for deliberation and ability to change mindsets, and to ensure responsive and inclusive public institutions. But then on the flip side of that, on the other side, too much stakeholder engagement can lead to stakeholder fatigue. It is not an assurance that there will be more effective, or fairer outcome. It can lead towards past dependencies from old trade-offs or failures, because it can attract only a specific type of stakeholders, or those perhaps who are the loudest or the most opposing might be the ones that are heard the most. It can be that there's just no impact despite a good strategy, and then the kind of high administrative and capacity and costs of stakeholder engagement, as similarly as for coordination, is something that needs to be considered at an early stage. So I think we are done, and there should be a Q&A before we go into an interactive session.
Thank you very much, Ms. Anna Thorlin and Dr. Adesibo, for the excellent presentations. Ms. Thorlin's presentation highlighted the need for cohesive, multi-stakeholder approaches to meet dual climate and development goals, and Dr. Adesibo's presentation underscored that integrated governance, combining vertical, horizontal coordination, stakeholder inclusion, and adaptive leadership is key to translating global commitments into actionable, equitable outcomes. Both of your presentations have generated a lot of questions from the participants. So now we will open the Q&A for participants. May I have both Ms. Anna Thorlin and Adesibo on the screen? Okay, yes. So I will first ask some questions addressed to Ms. Anna Thorlin. This question is from our participant, Joy. Is the toolkit also useful for governments to develop capacities in other areas requiring cross-disciplinary intergovernmental cooperation? Over to you.
Thank you. You hear me well, Shelley?
Yes, I hear you very well.
Thank you. Well, the toolkit I haven't mentioned before, but something that governments and different stakeholders, local authorities can request us when it's published for facilitation of capacity development of the toolkit. Today, what we are doing is to piloting only very few modules of the toolkit. But let me say that it is designed not only as a learning resource, but also as a practical guide for governments officials and policymakers. And this is to better understand the pivotal role of the public institutions in delivery and integrated climate actions, but also because this is specifically on climate actions. But yesterday, we learned about comprehensive disaster risk management, which also integrates disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. So there are different tools. Our tool is specifically in integrated climate actions across all areas of environment. For example, the Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change of Bangladesh has expressed interest in using the toolkit. So we are now designing and preparing for them based on their capacity needs. So we make an assessment before. And we not only assess one only ministry, but interministerial collaboration with the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Planning. That's how we, and for them, there is one module of interest, which is strategic foresight. So we're going to focus on strategic foresight, finance, and digital tools for this country. So you can take the modules and adapt to your needs. Thank you. I hope I respond.
Thank you very much, Anna. Next question I would like to address to Adis. It is asked by Dor Maringan. During the process, many stakeholders are identified, but the role of each are not specific or different and not efficient. Who and how to make sure we get the best stakeholders list?
Yeah, thanks for a really great and important question. There are, as I also emphasized, there are multiple tools that can help select and find stakeholders in a very structured way. But I think there is a kind of a cross-cutting element that is required where the kind of systematic approach needs to be combined with kind of a vulnerability assessment to see who are the kind of most vulnerable groups. Also, perhaps some kind of like we're going to talk about policy interactions a bit later, but it could be something around anticipating which groups will be affected the worst from a policy implementation or from a specific action. Similarly, who might be affected the least, or who might stand to lose the most from that decision. So just having a kind of like a preparedness of the kind of intangible aspects of policy implementation, and having that strategy and structure ready as a complement to any kind of structured systematic tool for stakeholder engagement.
Thank you very much, Adis, for that very comprehensive and concise response. Next question is addressed to Ms. Anna Thorlind. This is a question from our colleague Arike. We're curious to know, for countries such as South Sudan, he's a cultural and community health, rural and urban development. I have discovered that the country is completely divided. However, due to all these development continued fail in sustainable development. How can UNPOG help in implement both climate change and development?
Thank you. Thank you for these thoughtful questions. Well, you're highlighting a quite important and key challenge on how deep divisions can hinder sustainable development and climate action. So at UNPOG, which is the United Nations Project Office on Governance of DESA, we support countries using our tools, in particularly the curriculum on effective governance. We work also together with colleagues in New York. And this by strengthening public institutions and governance systems to be more inclusive and also more anticipatory and resilient. And we team also with colleagues from other UN entities like UNDRR for this. So through tools like, for example, this new climate governance toolkit that's going to be ready very soon, we aim to build this institutional capacity in reality to promote coordination across different sectors. And we have one colleague attending this event who also have a toolkit on effective national to local public governance for sustainable development. So this is the ways we also support countries, and we can support your country to also help community-driven approaches to integrate climate action and development priorities, and in particularly for fragile contexts like South Sudan. And one other area, just to quickly to say, is that we are inviting the government of South Sudan for the United Nations Public Service Forum to learn more about using AI and digital strategies for sustainable development. So we help, and we can help not only South Sudan, but other countries who request support to us. Just contact us. Maybe Jameson put my email in the chat, and then you can reach out to us if you are interested for a dedicated in-person or online training. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna, for your kind response. Next question is addressed to Adis from Zainula. How can developing countries balance rapid economic growth with environmental sustainability while ensuring no one is left behind?
Yeah, that's the key question. I think some of the kind of strongest negative interactions, if we look at the SDGs, the 17 SDGs, usually tend to be between the kind of economic dimension goals and environmental goals. And I think a first starting point is just to realize that there are some trade-offs and some conflicts that cannot be circumvented, and prepare strategies for kind of alleviating the worst outcomes, anticipating the biggest negative effects from these policies, and create strategies that can alleviate those.
Thank you very much for your kind response. Next one is to Ms. Anna Thorlin. This question is from Sale. How to turn the results of this tool into actionable recommendations for the different stakeholders involved?
Well, to turn the results of the tool into actionable recommendations. So I think it's the first point is to analyze the findings in the context of each stakeholder role, responsibilities and capacities. This tool have specifically that in the questions, and we are going to see that more in the readiness assessment as second part of today. So that will involve that you identify the specific gaps, and then the opportunities, and then the priorities are revealed by the tool, and you can translate it into tailored but mostly practical steps. So here what we want is the government institutions, they may include these policy adjustments and these coordination mechanisms or capacity maybe needs. So then the civil society and the community stakeholders can be part and engage on those strategies. They can be, the idea is also, as you can see, the government is going to use the tool. And what we want is also to raise awareness and in the importance of the stakeholders' engagement and for local, in particularly local adaptation actions.
Okay. Thank you very much for your response. Perhaps this might be the last question from this session due to time constraints, and this one is addressed to Adis. This question is from Vishnavi. Is it the methodological or data challenges preventing the empirical evaluation of such synergies?
Yes. I would say partially the kind of lack of data, the difficulty to establish or cost to kind of establish new baselines for new indicators is a significant challenge. But I think an equally important is the process itself. So not establishing good coordination strategies and not engaging stakeholders at the right time or the right stakeholders, not to make sure that goals are aligned across sectors, across policy domains, across kind of public institutions. Implementing those tend to be some of the core barriers for not leveraging those synergies, the kind of low-hanging fruit that might exist.
Thank you very much, Adis. Now we have 10 minutes left from this session, and we have an interactive session, which is on capacity gaps assessment and coordination strategy development. So I would like to hand the floor over to you, Dr. Zibo, for facilitating this activity.
Thank you, Shirley. Let's see, might have to do this a little bit faster than planned.
We can delay a little bit the break.
There.
The break.
So the idea here, I'll fold this down a little. The idea here is to kind of start thinking about a specific scenario where the kind of drought is at the forefront, and a severe drought has affected your region for the past 18 months, where crop failures have triggered food price spikes in urban markets and becoming a catalyst of rural-urban migration, but also kind of straining water resources, disrupting energy production, and leading to more globally market instability as global food commodity markets are becoming more volatile. So
Okay.
kind of
Cannot see.
Yeah, sorry.
We cannot see.
Yeah, but do you see the my screen?
Nope.
Okay. My apologies. So now.
That was perfect. Now we can read the scenario. Thank you.
Excellent. Great. Yeah, so the idea is to kind of continue using Mentimeter and think about kind of what are coordination strategies and implementation strategies within this context. So my apologies for not sharing the screen. So I'm gonna let this be up for a little bit while longer before moving over to the questions.
Maybe participants can take a picture.
Good. All right. So this is a kind of typical word cloud in terms of starting to. So the question is about trying to find what are the kind of directly exposed areas and sectors in such a scenario. So obviously agriculture, that's a good one. I see we're getting a few replies already, but what else would be great? Some more kind of labor issues and work, particularly smallholder farmers, the lack of social protection, but also we're going into some other kind of nexus related sectors like water, health, of course, and biodiversity and infrastructure, real estate. Great. So there's a kind of see that there's a good, interesting cloud emerging where beyond agriculture we have water and food security and impacts on local governments coming out here at the forefront. All right, let's switch over to the next question. Then idea here is to this is more of a multiple choice or poll question around the kind of more indirectly exposed domains. So like if we take a step forward, what are the kind of second order effects? Where are the kind of biggest issues within your context arising from in such a scenario? So we see some patterns emerging where obviously the kind of environmental dimension and the kind of interaction between different environmental sectors is lying there at the forefront, but also the economic and financial systems that are almost at the second place, but not far behind in terms of their second order exposure to such risks or slow onset events such as a long-term drought. Great. Let's see, do we have, moving over to the next question soon. Yeah. And yeah, then again, to go back to your own context and thinking about in that scenario, what kind of immediate coordination failures would you expect? And here are a few examples that we have added, but there's also an other, if there's something that you think is more important that is not reflected in this list. And feel free to write in the chat or note in the chat if you want to comment on any of these and explain why. Some other coordination element, coordination barrier might take precedence. But we also see that there is quite a strong pattern emerging around the failure of information sharing and the kind of delayed information sharing between, particularly at the national level, where we have line ministries and agencies having ineffective information sharing systems. But also the kind of political disagreements, political challenge, political tensions can also be one, and lack of finance. So you see that there are these top three are emerging as some of the most important ones. Interesting that there are a few who thought that there would be some other barriers that are more crucial and more important. Let's see if we can go then to the next one, which is the kind of counter argument to that. What do you think would be just one institutional mechanism that might, or that could, or that would even most effectively improve coordination in such a scenario? Oh, I see. I forgot to add an other category here, though. So if you think there's something else, please add it in chat, and we can see if we might revisit it. But here we have quite a strong dominance here on one mechanism that is more important than others. And if someone, I think, find this quite interesting. If there's someone who wants to provide a comment or has some thoughts around this, you can also raise your hand and be invited to provide a comment or provide some thoughts or reflections on this. I think, Shelley, if you can maybe moderate there.
Yes. So participants, if anybody would like to make a call. Yes, we see a hand from Mexi Banda. If you can unmute yourself for any reflections or comments.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm Max Vanda from Zimbabwe. I'm actually the director for public relations and international partnerships with Radio Climate International. We are actually implementing an extreme heat program My thoughts and also my experience is that how can we actually involve, especially the rights holders, into some of these processes? Because, for example, I realize they are actually left out, especially in some other negotiation spaces like the COPs or other climate related interventions. So how can we actually bring this message to them so that they can also be part of these processes? Thank you.
Yeah, dear, thanks, Meg, for the question. I mean, I would say it depends on what the challenge is. Is this kind of national issue, or is it a local level issue, or is it a more kind of participation in the global negotiation settings or global meetings? That would kind of direct the best strategy towards your question. But I think I commented on that before around there are kind of good systematic tools for engaging and for ensuring participation, but there is also the kind of intangible element of kind of knowing who those usually neglected groups are and how they can be engaged, and in what way, in what kind of cultural setting, and what venue or forum and so on.
Thank you. We would also like to hear more from you. If you would like to make any comments or reflect on this activity that we're engaging in right now, please feel free to raise your hand.
Yeah, and oh, I see that the questions did not, for some reason, come along here, but it's about, so this is a follow-up question on the previous one, and it would be around, does capacity for implementing your chosen mechanism currently exist at these different levels? So do you think that this is something that is just not sufficiently applied, so that there is a kind of more of an institutional failure, or is this more a political challenge where there are no structures in place currently? So we're ending up pretty much there in the middle around whether these are tools that exist but are not being efficiently applied, or whether there is just a lack of political will or interest around. And it's interesting also that it ends up more or less the same at all different levels of governance. Great. So there's just one final, more almost like a yes/no question here, on terms of just to kind of taking the temperature of where we are in terms of effective coordination, and do you think that it requires new institutions, new structures, or improving existing connections or connections between existing ones? This is also emerging as a really interesting finding around that we all seem to agree that there are tools there available. It's just that they're not really being applied in the way that they're supposed to. Great. All right. Thanks, everyone. I think this was, thanks also for providing your input. It will be very valuable for us as workshop organizers as well. I think we are 5 minutes over time, Shalit. Do you want to take a break now, or what are your thoughts?
Thank you, Dr. Zabel, for the excellent facilitation. Before we take a break, I would like to actually address one of the questions that was asked previously, which I missed, by Sari Seftiani. It is addressed to Ms. Anna Thorlin. Can you elaborate more the link between window opportunity and DRR efforts that you explained before? So after Anna provides the response to this question, we will go for a 10-minute break. Anna, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you. This is a very interesting question for the slide I shared before. So the concept of window opportunity is crucial for understanding the urgency and the potential impact of disaster risk reduction strategies in the context of climate resilient development. So as I mentioned in the IPCC report, diverging pathways are shaped by the choices and actions taken or not taken by the governments. And this was also said yesterday by the head of UNDRR, Oniagetis and Jajabatia, that everything is depending on which actions are you as government taking or not taking, but also actions from the private sector and the civil society. So the decisions influence whether the development trajectories in the graphic I shared before move toward greater sustainability, lower emissions, and more stronger adaptive capacity. So DRR plays a really crucial role in this process by proactively reducing the vulnerabilities, as we shared yesterday, and managing climate-related risks before this escalates really into a disaster. So what was the message there was that the window of opportunity is to act, that this window of opportunity to act is narrowing, is getting smaller, because every day in the emissions reductions not only increase the severity of climate impact, but also shrinks the set of effective adaptation options available. So I think I answered the question. I developed more the slide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna, for that response. So now we will take a 10-minute break. We are going a little beyond schedule. So we will return here by 4:10 p.m. Korea time prompt to proceed to part 2 of today's session. Thank you very much for all of your active and lively engagement. We will see you in 10 minutes at 4:10 p.m. Korea time prompt. Welcome back to part 2 of today's session. For those of you who just joined, I would like to introduce to you again Dr. Adi Zibo. He is a senior research fellow at the Stockholm Environment Institute. Dr. Zibo will now present on enabling efficient and effective policy processes. For questions, please feel free to enter them in the chat. Dr. Zibo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Shelley, and hi everyone. Hope you've had a nice break. The second part of our little mini workshop on policy implementation in day 2 of the workshop is targeting the kind of the enabling factors for efficient and effective policy implementation processes. And it will be a kind of direct continuation from the coordination and stakeholder engagement, and will illuminate issues around. Can you go to the next slide, Shelley? Around policy coherence, which here is defined as a process of policymaking that systematically considers the pursuit of multiple policy goals in a coordinated way that minimizes trade-offs and contradictions and maximizes synergies. And particularly in complex and in cross-cutting areas like climate action and DRR, there is where there are multiple agencies and stakeholders involved. The policy coherence can be a supporting a lens that supports aligning actions and decisions and strategies across different sectors and across different levels to make sure to achieve common goals and more effectively and more efficiently, but also could ensure that various policy measures are coherent and in their implementation, where conflicts are minimized or sought to be minimized, and duplication of efforts is avoided. And it also kind of supports integration of different perspectives in one policy area and can ensure that common goals are inserted within multiple domains and can enhance the overall impact. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, coherence has different approaches, different elements, different interpretations. It's a very kind of broad term and maybe even more kind of encompassing some of the other ones we're going to discuss, but it has kind of 3 broad framings, you can say. So one is around kind of the horizontal coherence, where the focus is on alignment and in interaction between sectors in a jurisdiction, such as public institutions and public national level public agency or local level. But it can also be a vertical, where local plans and actions and regional and national level policy are kind of implemented in a way that they don't cancel out each other, they don't create conflicts. And then there is also, I saw there was an interesting question from the last session around the transboundary and cascading effects, and there is one kind of international domain that is starting to emerge where coherence is emphasizing alignment and interaction between countries or between regions or between kind of telecoupled regions where around a certain issue areas like a specific product or supply chain and so on. It can also be around temporal effects as well, how a decision affects has an effect far in the future versus short term and so on. So can go to the next slide. Yeah, in terms of, I think I've touched upon some of these already, but there is a kind of a 2-way purpose of policy coherence. And one could be the kind of enhancing the positive elements, like fostering synergies, like mutually develop objectives that are mutually reinforcing, about kind of anticipating some of the most adverse outcomes, and devising strategies around seeking balance between the three broad dimensions of sustainable development: economic, social, and environmental, and also about kind of increasing effective and legitimate outcomes of policymaking. But there's also the flip side around the kind of ensuring negative reduction of negative outcomes from incoherence, avoiding goal conflicts, and removing institutional silos and fragmented policy implementation, minimizing impact, and kind of reducing negative consequences. Both of these are kind of working in tandem in a incoherent decision-making, policy-making. Can we go to the next slide? There's also a strong global lens or global importance of policy coherence, particularly in the 2030 agenda, where it is one of the targets. It's target 1714, which devises its own lens around policy coherence for sustainable development, and it is one of these objectives where that seeks to translate global goals or global commitments into national contexts and national implementation. Let's go to the next. So yeah, going back to the policy coherence for sustainable development, it's one of the core or key frameworks and governance approaches that is designed to align policies across sectors and levels of government, particularly for SDG implementation. It kind of takes a holistic approach, and here this figure emphasizes 8 pillars of policy coherence for sustainable development, where it illuminates the importance of the informed decision-making processes, of systematic consideration of policy effects, about good stakeholder participation and coordination between relevant actors, alignment of priorities and coordinated action vertically, but also the whole of government approach, making sure that all stakeholders are involved, that there is a strong civil society and community presence. Also a temporal element around ensuring the need of future generations, benefit drawing on synergies and addressing trade-offs, but also resolving divergences between policies, making sure that those elements that cannot be reconciled at least do not lead to the worst case scenario effects. Let's go to the next. Can we go to the next slide, Shelley? Yeah, I think you can press 2 more times, then we can just show the complete picture. As I mentioned before, some of the kind of barriers to coherence are institutional, particularly, and this is where the kind of the dominant discourse lies around that. Failure to implement coherently has largely to do with institutional fragmentation, with its silos decision making within the government, with ineffective participation, a little bit what we discussed before, the absence of vertical coordination. And these findings are empirical. So this is from a large project that I've been working on for the past 7 years, looking at comparatively across 9 countries at all levels of economic development around what are the key challenges for implementation of climate changes, sustainable development. But then there is also the kind of the hidden side of the barriers for policymaking, here represented as the iceberg. And we can kind of broadly frame them around political barriers. We can also distinguish between kind of ideological and interest-based, but it's around a crucial element for why climate and sustainable development is not implemented effectively is the prioritization of economic objectives over environmental and social. Tends to be a core issue in almost all countries. But there are others also include internal power dynamics between public institutions, budget allocations, of course, and internal hierarchies, as well as the role of powerful interest groups and their ability to disproportionately influence policy decisions. And then finally, the role of kind of broader misinformation and lack of public awareness around climate and sustainability challenges, but also benefits. All right, can we go to next? Yeah, so then the consequence from these barriers is that there are a lot of incoherence tends to arise in that implementation. When viewed from the lens of countries' commitments to the Paris Agreement and to the 2030 agenda, we see that it really tends to result in incoherent outcomes in all, more or less all countries, which kind of emphasizes the need or the requirement to focus on conflicting outcomes, to failure to consider such outcomes, which in turn increases the risk of ineffective and particularly unequal outcomes. I'll come to that a little bit later. It also reflects the power constellations where vested interests, particularly polluting industries or fossil fuel industries, can steer processes in undesired directions. Can also lead to it can be a consequence from the kind of less powerful public institutions and agencies being neglected, despite engaging in effective or strong coordination. The failure to deal with multiplicity of voices in a transparent manner, which then in turn tends to have a strong effect on what kind of outcomes are achieved, where we see that most efforts of coherent policymaking leads to incoherence, and where we see low income and emerging economies and high income countries alike, there are similar outcomes, but different drivers leading to those outcomes. Can we go to the next? Yeah. So in terms of what are the kind of strategies and what can be done about this, it's the importance, the focus on both the political and institutional failures, and acknowledge them at the start and shine a light on their effects. Basically, there's a need to kind of acknowledge and anticipate trade-offs to avoid the worst outcomes, to develop shared narratives and visions around what could be a sustainable and resilient future, on moving discussions to plurilateral settings, so negotiating at one level higher, as I think the example from the previous session that I showed was that not only could regional negotiations between countries lead to more effective national policy implementation, but it could also prevent some of those interests blocking progress. And then finally, the need to kind of acknowledge that it's not about seeking the optimum, but about the kind of good enough aspect of policymaking to make sure that agility and responsiveness and inclusiveness is part of that process, rather than trying to find the most kind of equal and most optimal outcome. Can we go to the next slide? And yeah, thanks. This is also one of our more recent findings on that there is a strong causality between efforts to engage in policy coherence for climate action, sustainable development, and outcomes that are positive and lead to benefits across the whole society. So there we found a significant link between that coherent outcome create benefits for all groups, and where particularly the vulnerable groups tend to benefit more than others. So it has a strong effect on reducing inequality as well as achieving intended goals. Opposite side of that, we see that there are some groups that benefit more than others from incoherence, and tends to be groups that fall within the kind of political elites and fossil fuel industries and so on. So that it's not a neutral element or a neutral consequence from attempt to implement coherently, but there are actually direct links between incoherence and benefits for certain groups, while at the same time we see that it also has an increasing inequality effect where the more vulnerable groups in the society tend to bear the burden more than others. Can we go to the next slide? So yeah, then in terms of how I think we could try to perceive these building blocks, could be around like a processual stage where one element leads into, so where effective policy coordination creates enabling environment to be able to align policies coherently, to implement, and then finally to ensure that there is a strong integration of common goals across across multiple sectors and policy domains as a way or as a strategy to both achieve domestic priorities and to implement the global commitments. So let's take a first break here, and then we can go to the next section afterwards.
Thank you very much, Adis, for the presentation. Now we will take some questions from the floor. There are many questions.
Maybe before we go into that, I see just a technical question on what the numbers stood for in that figure on successful implementation. So that was just a literature review on seeking studies that have analyzed policy coherence and pointed to specific outcomes linked to the coherence. So it's just basically the number of papers supporting the statement that coherence leads to effective outcomes and incoherence to ineffective.
Thank you for addressing that question. There's, I think, another question on what are these groups that benefit coherence of our country? This question is from Razma Saad.
Yeah, I mean, I guess all countries have their national context and national processes, different policy cycles, different ways policies are implemented. The way the figure that I showed in the last slide was a way to try and seek the universal elements that can be found in all countries, in all policy processes. So there are, on one hand, some areas that are the same, and on the other hand, some that are just very intangible and very specific for.
Thank you. There's a question from Alejandro on how to minimize political barriers.
Is that to me, Shelley, or? Sorry, I think I was talking, but was being muted, perhaps. Could you repeat the question?
Yes, this question is how to minimize political barriers from Alejandro.
Good, also good question, $1 million question, but I think it requires acknowledgement that coherence is a normative approach. So coherence, seeking coherence between climate action and sustainable development means perhaps sacrificing some other areas of policymaking intentionally, and to avoid the barriers in implementation is to kind of start with acknowledging that and creating a narrative around what that means, anticipating who wins and who loses out, and devising strategies that are kind of attuned to that. So there are no questions, there are no clear solutions that will work on everywhere, but I think just kind of like a high level recognition that there are these issues, I think, is a good starting point.
May I add something, Chile?
Sure.
In terms of barriers for policy coherence, in my experience, I think it would be very important to build a high-level political commitment. And I think this is something that we are going to discuss later in the readiness assessment tool, in which the first building block, the first part of this tool is how the political commitment towards climate action is endorsed, how national leaders or key ministries can elevate coherence as a government priority. For example, in the past, we were looking at different champions for disaster risk reduction, and here we can find champions for overcome resistance in different interests and around shared goals. But there's another thing that I would recommend is the strengthening the transparency and accountability, because there are clear reporting and monitoring frameworks to track this progress. Can make siloed approaches more visible and harder to defend. So the transparent data and join, for example, progress reviews with pressure for coordination and highlighting, for example, inefficiencies. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is, can you please clarify the difference between policy coordination, policy coherence, and policy integration? This question is from Vincent.
Thanks, Vincent. I think it's a great question, and so we have provided kind of definitions, and I've tried to emphasize that what is the role of coordination vis-a-vis coherence and integration. But I think the relationship is the one that, in my opinion, is a causal one. So an effective policy process starts with good coordination strategies, which then have an effect on ability to align policies, ability to implement coherently, which in turn then goes towards the kind of that upper right corner on ability to ensure that there are common goals across policy domains and across sectors. But there is a lot of ambiguity and a lot of different terminologies used in this field, and it's not as clear cut as it should be. I do acknowledge that.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead, Anna.
Yes, in the policy integration thinking, I think what is very interesting is how you embed the cross-cutting issues. For example, climate action, gender, sustainability, that's links to a previous question on different intersectoral, interministerial collaboration. So embedding these issues into all stages of the policy making across sectors will be very, very important. That's, for me, the policy integration.
Thank you. Next question is, what are the most common barriers to efficient policy implementation in developing countries such as Malawi, and how can they be addressed? This is a question from Ashley.
Yeah, thanks for that great question. I think one of the key findings of our recent work is that incoherence arises in all countries. We have implementation issues that are not tied to level of economic income or ability to implement policy or interest and so on. But I think so. We haven't done research in Malawi, but we have done in other countries in sub-Saharan Africa where commonalities show that often it's the lack of capacity, particularly at the low subnational level. So poor vertical interaction and vertical coordination tends to be a significant barrier for coherence. There's also kind of corruption and slow bureaucracy, of course, and lack of finance are some of these specific drivers that we found in sub-Saharan Africa, but not necessarily tied to that region only. Where in contrast, if you look at more kind of higher level income, we also do see similarly corruption, but more the main drivers are more around kind of overly specialized ministries who don't want to collaborate and want to stay within their fragmented silos, within their silos, or kind of cross-cutting coordination bodies that lack empowerment or decision-making abilities as another reason. So more kind of window dressing rather than engaging in coherent implementation in earnest.
Thank you. We have many questions, but there's another question from Dan. The question is how to give incentives or induce governments of the developing countries to develop policy coherence in the context of DRR.
All right, okay, now I see the question. I mean, incentives, all countries have committed to implementing the Sendai framework, to the Paris Agreement, to 2030 agenda. So that I wouldn't frame that as a kind of incentive. That should be a stated goal. Like the governments of all these countries have expressed this as a stated goal, and these are their global commitments. So they need to be translated domestically. Obviously, there are as that IPCC figure I showed that no country is in that sustainable development corridor yet. So all countries have that incentive if we are going to achieve our common challenges. But we all different countries have different contexts and starting points, and so that's where the kind of interesting questions are. So what is the role of providing capacity support or technical support or increasing climate finance or development finance for improving policy coherence? And I know that is slowly emerging within the multilateral funding bodies, where, for example, Jeff, I know, has a clear and directed, ambitious strategy to ensure that there is a coherent implementation in their own project portfolio.
Thank you, Adis. We have 1 more minute left for this Q&A session, so I will give the last question to Anna. It's quite long, so I hope you can listen fully. This question is from Abd Rashid Sahar. Currently, many local governments in Indonesia still struggle to internalize and implement global platforms or standards, such as the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, Build Back Better, or the SDGs, in post-disaster management. Although there are various models of intergovernmental collaboration, sectoral interests often hinder effective implementation. How do you view this situation?
Wow, that's very important. Thank you, an observation. I think the challenge faced by many local governments in Indonesia is not uncommon to decentralized systems, but Indonesia has this issue of amazing number of disasters triggered by natural hazards. So this is all hazards. And especially in terms of the global frameworks, they need and must be translated into the local realities. We were very recently in a workshop in Nepal, and I was very glad and inspired to hear how much they are contextualizing, and that's what we call localization of the SDGs, localization of DRR, because translating into the local realities under these conditions are limited with limited capacity, or also the problem is the competing priorities. So there is the high-level policy commitment versus reality and implementation gap, and I think the strong formal commitment frameworks is really important for national action. But then the local governments often face these difficulties to internalize them. And that's why there is the need of technical support and guidance. And that's something that we from UNPOG and UNDRR and other entities provide guidance notes. We do specifically guidance note for the SDGs, specifically, for example, decentralization, multi-level governance. And UNDRR have extremely very good guidance note for disaster, for example, disaster recovery planning and other that can be very helpful. And I'm happy to share more references for you to answer more this question and to make this a reality in your country, in your city, in your community. Thank you.
Shelley, could I add something to that as well? Yeah, thanks. I think it's a great question, but it's not a one-way direction. That the kind of these global mechanisms and global agendas are kind of not being reflected locally. It has the other way. There's an implication in the other way around. So the kind of local level is where these where implementation takes place. And if there is low capacity or low knowledge about what are the global mechanisms actually are, then the reporting to those mechanisms is also lacking. So there is not only failure to ensure that these are reflected on the ground, but there is also failure to ensure that it's what is monitored is what is supposed to be monitored and verified and enabled and so on. So there is it's an importance to ensure more effective implementation of the agendas, right, as well as more effective implementation on the ground.
Thank you very much to all the participants for sending us great questions, and to Adis and Anna for addressing them. Although we didn't have enough time to address all of them, I'm sure we will try to do it through other methods as written in the chat by our colleagues. So now I give the floor back to Dr. Zibo, who will facilitate an interactive activity on scoring and assessing horizontal interactions with the SDG synergies. Dr. Zibo, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Shelley. Unfortunately, I have a few more slides, introductory slides before we get to that. But the kind of the next step in this part is to actually start thinking about, like, how can that be operationalized? How can it be done on the ground by government officials? And the one way, or one aspect, one crucial aspect for policy coherence is to be able, the ability to assess interactions between policies or between goals or objectives and so on. And in this case, as what I mentioned before, the kind of the kind of complexity of issues that you are working on implementing climate policy and DRR strategies is necessitates a systems thinking approach to be able to implement coherently. And one thing we're gonna go into soon is around a specific tool and SDG synergies to assess how goals and objectives interact and how they impact each other, and what the consequences are. Or we're not going to use the tool itself because it's more it requires more effort and time. But some just kind of doing like a light touch, a subset of the tool to start thinking about the interaction and system thinking. So it will be around categorizing and prioritizing objectives and developing strategies based on the results. Can we go to next slide? Yeah, so systems thinking is about informing the design and of evaluations that capture various impacts of policies in different policy areas that are nonlinear, but are approached in a holistic and systematic way. So it's an approach that views complex entities as coherent wholes whose components are best understood in relation to each other and to other systems rather than isolation, which in turn then necessitates a more an approach, a coherence approach or an integration approach. And the purpose is to find entry points or leverage points to increasing synergies between various nodes, and also ensuring that policies and mechanisms are designed to account for these interdependencies and feedback loops and unintended consequences. So, and there are various tools that can be applied used to think in this way. Another is, of course, foresight methodology and engaging in trying to think about potential futures based on certain specific decisions. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, but the kind of broader general approach is around seeking to understand the dynamics of a specific system in terms of what cause and effect they have, what causality, what are the feedback loops and spillover risks, and what are the interdependencies at various levels. And then from there, devise, anticipate or anticipate specific interactions in terms of where are the positive synergies, where are the co-benefits and spillover effects, but also what are the points of resistance, where is the potential contestation going to happen, what are the cross-scale effects, both between governance levels, but also between various sectors and domains, and then finally to develop strategic interventions in terms of how to coordinate, how to engage with stakeholders, devise integration strategies and with specific leverage points, and of course monitoring both implementation and evaluating outcomes. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, so one specific tool that was developed by colleagues at my institute to think about in these ways is the SDG synergies tool. It's a tool and a method that aims to establish alignment and interaction between objectives and helps to visualize synergies and trade-offs to kind of pinpoint strategic entry points to implementation, to help prioritize between multiple objectives and to align objectives with appropriate policy instruments in their implementation, to assign appropriate budgeting and monitoring systems, anticipating outcomes, as well as evaluating and comparing with previous assumptions to be able to learn on feedback loops and spillover effects and future implementation. So there are broadly three steps for implementation. And if you go to next slide, the first one is around contextualization, which is, can you do next slide, Shelley? Yeah, which basically is around selecting the most relevant goals that will affect that specific domain. And these are real examples from, I think, Germany's energy transition around what are the most kind of driving policy areas and policy objectives for the German government to achieve its energy transition goals. But it can also be kind of like a bottom-up organic selection of targets. It can also be a more of a top-down approach. If you go to next slide, where SDG targets can be selected as primary points of analysis, and how kind of starting with global targets and translating them into national context or subnational context or sectoral context, and then kind of aligning those goals as the environment to provide scoring to, which is the next slide. And then having selected your policy environment, your set of goals, that for this methodology should not really exceed more than 2025 because there's an exponential effect in terms of interactions. But then trying to assign the outcomes in terms of, do they really strongly support each other? So indivisible, are they reinforcing? Are they enabling each other? So different variations of synergies, and similarly constraining and counteracting and canceling, which is also kind of variations of trade-offs, going from kind of light minor trade-offs to direct conflicts. Next slide. Which then leads to something like this matrix, where you can get an overview of all type of interactions. It can be here, it's color coded to see where are the strong synergies, where are the strong trade-offs, what is there in the middle. Can also be, the tool can also show not only outward influence, meaning that how one progress on one target would impact all other targets, so providing like a full picture sum, but also the inverted. So how would progress on other targets benefit or not progress on one specific target? So there's a good two-way type of system and analysis of the system that provides a really good overview. Can we go to the next slide? Which would then support provide strategizing and developing policy implementation options, where pinpointing one specific goal or one specific target because of its strong synergistic effect, or preparing strategies for the kind of adverse outcomes of some of those most conflicting or most with effects with the strongest trade-off or lowest synergies. So it's a good tool to provide a full picture assessment of an issue area or a domain, and then going into developing strategies, often in a stakeholder engagement way, like interactive with government officials is the most. There are different ways to do it, but the most common is to basically just put all the relevant people in one room and make sure that they agree on what goals, what interactions, and what strategies to devise. We'll go to next slide. Yeah, all right. There is a smaller interactive session for this, but maybe if there are any technical questions around this first and foremost, or more content-based questions on system thinking as well, if we could maybe take 2-3 minutes, shall we?
Sure. Let's see. This is another long question from Epifania. Considering the systematic change of institutional names in some countries, this involves not only the already trained focal points and the existing coordination structure, but also has implications for policies. Taking Mozambique as an example, how can the permanent integration of disaster risk management and reduction actions be ensured?
Yeah, I don't personally see, so I don't have any personal experience with it, but I don't. It would be great if you could explain how kind of change of names would lead to these type of issues. But I'm sure that that's very much possible, but not something I've come across, at least in my work. But I can imagine maybe if there are some political elements to change of name, or if there is some kind of local conflict-driven type of decision. But yeah, I'm honestly not sure.
Okay, I just see a new question that just came in. It disappeared.
All right, we can also go into the next activity. And then have a more of a question after a session afterwards.
Okay, so let's go into the interactive group activity. We have about 10 minutes. Is that okay? Or which?
Yep, that's
okay.
good.
Let's spend about 10 minutes for the interactive activity on scoring and assessing horizontal policy interactions with the SDG synergies.
So can you confirm that you see my screen?
We see your screen. However, it's not a Mentimeter screen.
Oh, okay. There.
And now we see the Mentimeter. Yes.
Great. Yeah, so this will be I've tried to extract some elements from SDG synergies to fit this large number of participation and kind of the online interaction. But it also starts with kind of like a policy scenario around the third generation NDCs, and for each of you within your context, thinking about your mandate to demonstrate integrated implementation of the Paris Agreement and the 2030 Agenda to anticipate how policy objectives interact in order to design the most effective implementation strategy. So usually there are many more goals, but just some here to reflect on is about thinking about the interactions. It says 3, but it should be 5. Areas around mitigation goals, around achieving emission reductions, about accelerating progress on those SDG targets that are lagging, around the economic mandate to maintain high annual GDP growth, around just transition mechanisms where importance of ensuring that nobody's left behind in the transition to climate resilience, and then ecosystem restoration to kind of thinking about the importance of restoring degraded lands and protecting biodiversity. So yeah, just basically broader context. There will be a little bit more explanation on a specific target. I'll leave it a little bit more because the system doesn't allow to show it again. All right. So, and then just a poll here about if forced to sequence implementation due to capacity constraints, which area should your country prioritize first among these, would you argue? Interesting that a lot of DRR community is around really emphasizing the SDG implementation, so the kind of the holistic approach. While ecosystem restoration was a bit surprising on the other hand. Good. All right, let's go to the next question then. So, and this is starting to directly think about interactions and system interactions. And the question here is about the mitigation goal and the kind of economic development goal and how do they interact. So how does achieving 40% emission reductions by 2050, which is your country's objective, and how does that affect the ability to maintain the 3.5% annual economic growth target. Is there a strong synergy there? Is there a strong conflict? Where do you? Also very interesting that we see a positive relationship here between emissions reductions and economic growth. Not usual. Usually one of those where there tends to be more conflicting elements. So I would love to hear someone later if you have some ideas around why, and if you want to motivate your scoring, just either add it in the comments or raise your hand a little bit later. So when we're done, I think we can have a discussion. All right, and then I think there is a follow-up word cloud here then. Just kind of building on that target or interaction. What is the primary mechanism or integration mechanism that is needed for balancing climate mitigation and economic growth? It's just kind of short, concise around what is the implementation strategy to reconcile the positive synergies between emission reductions and economic growth? It's coherence, I see, education, policy implementation and planning. Exciting. Similarly, if someone wants to add a reflection on this, just write it in the chat or raise your hand later. I'll be very excited to hear. All right, let's go to the next. A second level of pairing of targets here is about how does accelerating SDG implementation affect the ability to ensure a just transition for affected workers. And just to add maybe a little bit more context around the affected workers, it would be creating alternative livelihoods for example, those employed in the fossil fuel industries and communities who are dependent on these industries, and also while ensuring that climate policies are not exacerbating inequalities or creating a new form of exclusion. And here is a more going towards a more kind of expected outcome, that there should be quite a good synergy there between those two. All right, I think there is one more word cloud now around that, building on that question and on that interaction, which emphasizes the kind of what are the vulnerable groups that require the most attention to be able to ensure a just transition. How much time do we have, Shelley?
I think we can start wrapping up the interaction.
All right, then just one last one. I'll do it this a little bit quickly. So apologies for running a bit late. Here is the one kind of progress on biodiversity and ecosystems target on restoring 30% of degraded lands by 2030 to protect biodiversity. How does that influence the ability to reduce emissions by 40% by 2050, you should say, actually? Also an interesting positive interaction here. And then finally, I think this is the final one. So just kind of closing it up. What mechanism? Again, a word cloud here. What NDC mechanism can ensure effective integration between climate action, DRR, and sustainable development? You can just kind of, what is that one, 2 words solution? And this is the last question. So yeah, either, I don't know, Shani, if you want, if there are any interesting comments, or if you want to go for a break immediately.
I think it's worth inviting participants for comments. So if anybody has a strong comment or reflection they would like to make, particularly on the positive the correlation, please, you can unmute yourself or turn on your camera and share your experience with us. I do not see a raise of hand, but if anybody has an experience they would like to share with us, please raise your hand. You can, oh, there, I see Susan Suckler. Sorry for butchering your name. Please go ahead and share
Thank
your...
you. This is Susan Suckler from Kenya. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I hear you.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Thank you for the educative sessions. What I'm hoping is, I'm hoping that we can see a point in time where whatever policies we are doing are now being translated into civic education, of which the communities, once they have a buy-in and they have a collaborative understanding of what we are trying to push across, what they're supposed to do, how they're supposed to react, then they're able to even take up some of these initiatives on their own and carry out the various activities that we need them to implement. Otherwise, there is a disconnect between what governments and implementing agencies are trying to do across the board, especially in Africa, where we are from. So once the community has a buy-in, they tend to drive the entire program, making it quite easy and also cost-effective, because if everybody takes up their role to take care of certain areas to ensure that they do not have a negative but a positive impact on climate change and the rest, then majority of what we are really trying to do would be done at more than half the cost, less than half the cost. So that would be my take. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Adis, do you have any reflections, or should we go to the next? Okay, so next I call upon Solomon Gachanja.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah.
Mr. Solomon, I think you are muted.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm Solomon Gashanja from Nairobi, Kenya. My contribution is in terms of the action of planting trees. I want to understand from the other side of the globe what is happening, because this is very prominent in Africa and especially in Kenya. But I feel like the planting of trees in the global south is a minimal effect towards climate change, because the African side of this side of the globe, the effect, the contribution to the climate change is very minimal as compared to the other side of the globe, where I don't know whether they're doing the tree planting and what effect does the tree planting. What is the average cumulative effect to tree planting against the climate change that comes from, industrialization. Thank you.
Thank you. Should we hear one more? Do we have? Okay, so we will hear one more last one from William Dare, and then we will take a 5-minute break. William Dare, I give you the floor.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. And not like the last person said, I'm looking at how we can implement the Paris Agreement in a nature-based solution of planting of economic trees. Like I did a project some years ago, and I tagged it as planting of economic tree, the cheapest solution to climate change. And I want to see how this can be implemented in all the rural communities and all the local governments and, if possible, cities in Nigeria and in Africa. And I believe that if we can do that, we'll be able to mitigate climate change to a great and large extent. I don't know how United Nations can help at this regard, because I believe that is one of the major solutions we can use to mitigate climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your active participation. Due to time constraints, we will stop here and take a 5-minute break, and we will meet here again at 5:16 p.m. Korea time sharp. Please do not leave, but stay with us, because we will be sharing with you a very important tool on climate readiness assessment. So I look forward to seeing you again in 5 minutes at 5:16 p.m. prompt. welcome back. I have the pleasure to introduce to you again Ms. Anna Thorlin. She is the Governance and Public Administration Expert of UMPOG, DPIDG, UNDESA. Ms. Thorlin will introduce to you the Climate Readiness Assessment for Public Institutions. Ms. Thorlin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shelley. I will have a very short presentation. First of all, I wanted to share a little few words about the question just before, on the comments just before the break, about the national-based solutions and ecosystems. I think they are fascinating. I think we implement the Paris Agreement through national-based solutions like the tree planting, and I think this is something that UNDP does a lot. So to restore degraded ecosystems and to enhance biodiversity and absorb CO2 is fundamental. There is a lot of activities. UNDRR office in Bonn does also a lot of work on national-based solutions. They have good guidance and practices. So I think this is a great comment for colleagues who was sharing in the chat and giving their comments. Now, I would like to move to the Climate Readiness Assessment Tool, and this is a company document of the training toolkit, which is going to be released soon, probably in July. We're in the final stage of the reviewing of the toolkit that we are piloting today. The readiness assessment tool is a survey. Next slide, please. And an institution's readiness of public, institutional, I can mention, readiness assessment of public institutions. And this is for the synergistic climate action. And this has been developed along with a toolkit by UNDESA and is based in already an available readiness assessment on institutional arrangements for policy coherence. So there are several questions that consist on 8 chapters that are aligned with the toolkit structure and consist of questions that target the national policy landscape. So we really reflect strongly on how we develop this survey. And this is like yesterday, we shared the disaster resilience scorecard for cities, the climate addendum with different questions, 9 to 10 essentials, but in each essential related to climate. If you want to understand the difference of what you learned yesterday and today, the readiness assessment is a zoom on the governance aspects. So you will have 8 chapters of the tool, and then you can, for example, are asked to provide information on specific policies and strategies to make judgments or assess the direction of specific issues or policy domains. So the first one is about political commitment towards climate action. The second part of the readiness assessment tool is from organizational structures and processes, which include stakeholders, system thinking, coherence between national to local, and the monitoring. At the monitoring, we finish step 2, which is institutional capacity. And then there is one specific tool for which is new. And you can click, my colleague, click again the slide, please. Yes, and again. So we have 2 new aspects that we integrate into this tool, which is forecasting and strategic foresight methodologies. It's an assessment. So we're going to check how ready are you in terms of strategic foresight. How is your understanding of strategic foresight? And what are your capacity gaps on strategic foresight? So then you can do the action plan. And the last one is about digital technology and data tools. So this is the toolkit is aimed at supporting public institutions in assessing your institutional readiness to implement climate action systematically and integrated with the climate goals across sectors and policy domains. So let's look at this diagnosis, to which extent the current public sector priorities and strategies and maybe the rules and regulations, the competencies, including the mindsets, enable effective climate action at multiple levels of governance. So let's move to the next slide. So the first one we have is the commitment. How is the institutionalization of political commitment towards synergetic climate action? So you have questions like, do you have a national climate action plan? So yesterday we were asking, do you have a DRR action plan? So now it's a climate action plan. And if not, if you don't know, please, you have to go to the next question. But then there is another question. So you put yes, no, I don't know. And then there is a legal or equivalent statement endorsed at the highest political level, spelling out the government's commitment to seek synergies between climate change and other policy areas. So you check yes, no, etc. So, and there is, the tool is intended to be done by several ministries together. It's not for one single ministry, but it's a cross-ministry activity. And the beautiful of this is the stakeholder conversation. The different ministries and participate other stakeholders to this conversation. Next one, please. The second one is about organizational structures and processes. So here we're looking at institutional capacity building and readiness. So where are the implementation gaps? What are the barriers and constraints? Bridging the implementation gap. Then the policy coordination. And we will talk since early today about the policy coordination. So this question is very similar to the question I received early today. Is there a central government or unit or interministerial committee specifically tasked with promoting coherent and integrated planning, policy making, implementation monitoring of climate action between ministries, departments, and agencies? You can give us also feedback if the questions are too long or too difficult to understand, so we can also improve. We see this as a live document. And then you answer yes, no, I don't know. And then there are questions about how effective is your coordination. And the most realistic the answers are, the better it serves the tool. Otherwise, it will not serve the purpose of the design, of the objective of the tool. Next one, please. Last one is about stakeholders engagement. And here you have, are there mandatory legal frameworks to ensure stakeholder participation in the climate policy cycle? So how is this mandatory? Do you have any legal framework? So we really ensure this participation. But we're talking here about the planning, the formulation, the content, the implementation, and the evaluation. If you don't know, of course, you go to another question. But also other questions, this is an example. What are the issues that stakeholders are consulted? Are they consulted on climate adaptation planning and targets evaluation? And then we ask even more to specify who the government interacts with. So this is some of the, next one, please, some of the highlights of the tool. Next one, please. And then we move to the action development, because you have to develop a plan after using that tool. And here you will have different policy interventions, what policy instruments you're using, establish the dual horizon of the outcomes, what specific outcomes will be achieved. So you have the vision of 2035, but now that we are integrating strategic foresight, which is uncertainties, we're going to look more to up to 2050. So that's how we look to do this plan after this readiness climate assessment tool. Next one, please. And the last is to do really a plan. And that's something that we wanted to share in today's session, is that at the end, you go out with a strategic policy domain plan in which you're going to look at institutional coordination. So the question is, what overarching institutional changes are needed for better institutional coordination and collaboration? The second question will be, what specific and measurable, of course, measurable objectives will achieve this goal? So what is needed, but also what is the objective, what we are going to achieve with this goal? And then what are actions? What are the actions you need to really do to do that policy change, that change that you just mentioned in the first column, what is the changes need? So then you will put the action. So that's all from the action plan. So you will have that on institutional coordination, on stakeholder engagement. So let's put in practice. I have a Mentimeter ready. If my colleagues can share the third Mentimeter. And if not, I will do so. Please just share close the.
While we wait for the Mentimeter to upload, there is one question from the floor, if you could address it. The question is there a definition, effectiveness to guide the scoring with the 5-point scale?
It is, no, we don't have, but we can add some criteria there. It's not right now in the tool, but it is up to you what you feel an effectiveness. And we have the effectiveness points already shared in the tool. So I think the participant who's using the readiness assessment tool is directed to what effectiveness. We're looking at effectiveness of institutions in terms of strategic planning, in terms of strategic foresight, and other effectiveness. And they will learn from the toolkit, but I will put a note on how for rating. I think that's the question for rating from 1. What do you mean by poor effectiveness and high, very, very effective? Yes, I will put that note. Thank you. Okay, so do we have the tool? Thank you for sharing. You have the link to Mentimeter. You have the code to go to the Mentimeter. So the first question, I think, oh yes, participants are into the tool. So the first question is, does your country have a national climate action plan? Okay, many people don't know, but right now the majority is telling us that yes, you have an action plan. This is for the first tool. Next one, please. This is very clear. We go for a lot of yes, we do have a climate action plan. The next one. Does the government apply open government principles in participatory climate policy processes? Here I would like to give some more time because that will change the first responses. So this is to trigger also the idea of open government principles for participatory climate policy process. So there are many countries that they see participatory climate policy processes, some not, and some don't know. But right, majority is yes. Adis, if you want any time to jump in, please feel free to. Next one, please. Now we are moving to the next question related to the second one, the second part of the readiness assessment tool, which is the institutional level. Okay. So these questions are, this part is about organizational structures and the processes. So here, do your National Climate Action Plan reflect on, connect to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDGs? So we see some connection in most of the countries.
Yeah, so that's a very, very strong balance towards direct connections. When I started working on the NDC SDG interactions, the kind of the first finding we had was that these connections were implicit rather than direct. So I think we can see that there's been quite a significant positive development in that direction.
Yes. Yeah, very good. So I think, yes, it's very clear, the response here. We still have several don't know, which is important to know about it. And a few countries, they don't see the link between the climate plan and the SDGs, which that's why the synergistic, for those countries, for those nine questions, those countries, I think that's where the toolkit also will be very beneficial. Next one, please. Is there a legal or equivalent statement endorsed at the highest political level, spelling out the government's commitment to seek climate SDG synergies? We're not talking about only climate action per se, but the synergies that they want to, that we're looking for. More countries than before, that they have less policy statements on commitment for this, building this synergy. Before we only had 9. Now we have 26, 30.
Also very interesting finding.
Yes, exactly. The analysis of the tool is very interesting when you process all these survey questions. Next one, please. So if there is a central government unit, ministry, or interministerial committee specifically tasked with promoting coherent and integrated planning, so is this a task for the Ministry of Environment, or is a task for the Planning Ministry or the Prime Ministry Office? So that's the question.
If there is time for discussion or maybe add a comment in chat, I would love to hear more about what that specific committee or unit, how it's functioning and what are its effects. And if there are someone who has any insights, please write them in the chat.
Okay, because here is, well, the point is, this is interesting, is to know in which country you really are promoting coherent and integrated planning. Because we have 160 countries saying, yes, we are doing coherent and integrated planning. So tell us a little bit in the chat, which are those ministries or these bodies, intergovernmental bodies that are doing such coherence work, which will be very interesting to highlight in the toolkit too, as a good example, probably. Next one, please. Next one. Thank you. I think we're moving to the stakeholder mechanisms. If I know, maybe it's still in the same of previous. If yes, there is such a climate-focused mechanisms exist. Well, I put that question, Adis, in this slide. So you have the answer, because I was thinking the same when preparing the meter. So I was asking, if you have the climate-focused mechanism that exists, which institutions are involved and who leads this effort? Please specify and highlight. So we have the National Disaster Risk Reduction Management Councils, the President, more the DRR councils. I think this is very much from the Philippines. Thank you from colleagues from Philippines to always being in our training and courses. We acknowledge your presence today. Government Ministry of Environment, Presidency's offices, disaster management and green. I cannot read more, but that's a little bit, I cannot read more. Thank you. Oh, thank you. We have more. The Climate Change Commission, Ministry of Environment. So we see basically this mechanism is led by the Ministries of Environment. But just wanted to share the whole idea of the toolkit and all these steps of institutional capacity is to not only let the Ministry of Environment as the sole leader, because climate change should be interministerial, intersectoral. So we want to enhance the other ministries that they said, this is not maybe my role. We have a ministry. Every ministry, every single line ministry have a role in disaster risk reduction and climate change and the SDGs. So I think this is what we want to achieve. Next one, please. It's beautiful. So how the Central Climate Governance Body organized to promote policy coherence and integrate climate planning? Now we're going more in depth. Sorry, you need to think.
Yeah.
Because this is the tool. So we're going, yes, no idea is a good answer. That's your answer. You don't know, but let's see some other answers. We have the cabinet level agency, but the question is how? How? I need more details. It's not the institutional level, but I would like to hear more details of how the governance body organized to promote policy coherence. This is a little bit what also Addis was looking to hear from you. If you are doing policy coherence, if 140 countries responded, yes, we are doing, we want to see how you are doing. And that's why the tool is very interesting. It's not one person perspective, it is a multi-stakeholder perspective that has to be. I'm checking the time, so we'll not go beyond time. Can you scroll down the person who's dealing with the Mentimeter, please? So maybe we have some more. So it's the national climate. Yes, so here we have one answer. Training seminars to all levels. This is how you are doing the policy coherent and integrated climate planning. Through training at different levels, top-down and bottom-up structure. So this is the kind of meetings. Provisional and local government committees are meeting to do the policy coherence. So you have these consultations, coordinated budget to harness climate adverse effects, the multi-stakeholder collaboration. Okay. Yes, exactly what we want. Oh, this is one big response through interagency, whole of government, and whole of society approach in the planning and implementation of climate-related policies. Wow. Well, this is exactly what we want that governments do.
That's the holy grail.
Yes. Climate change commissions, they mainstream in the climate issues on the development planning document. That one is something to highlight one. This one, that one, yes, thank you. Mainstream the climate issues on the development planning document in national up to subnational level in Indonesia. Wonderful. I hope also that disaster risk reduction and the climate issues are both at the planning level, because that's how you make really the policy coherence happen. Thank you. Next one, please. We go, I think, to the stakeholder. No, we're in the action plan. Great. So when we finish the analysis of the readiness assessment tool, we do have an action plan. And the action plan is, we're going to make questions in the different columns that I showed you before. So for institutional coordination and collaboration, what overarching institutional changes are needed in your country? So you need cross-sectoral climate planning and policy coherence, exactly. If you found that you have little, you need that. Establish, I will take a picture for the next question because I will need to have this in my, very well, in my comments for the next one, because we need to be ready to get for the next one. So you need to establish a central climate authority to ensure interministerial coordination and integration climate goals into national planning, policy coherent and integrated climate planning. So you need, so here is what overarching institutional changes are needed. Need multi-stakeholder collaboration. We need multi-stakeholder planning. So we are repeating a lot, legislative clear rules and mandates of all agencies. So, okay, so let's move to the next one. So now that we know that you need cross-sectoral climate planning and policy coherence, what specific measures and objective will achieve this goal? And this is a lot from what Addis was talking earlier before. It's kind of quiz. So in Bangladesh, needs to establish a high-level cross-sectoral coordinating body, integrated data systems, and joint planning mechanisms to ensure effective institutional coordination and collaboration. No one left behind, exactly. If you do the final measurable objective, we need to have the objective and maybe better with the language to be better defined to have measurable. establish of a task force of consistent multi-stakeholders, the mainstreaming level of climate change adaptation. Yes, and effective communication between key stakeholders. So that's what we're going to achieve. So if you do this earlier policy coherence and integrated climate planning, multi-stakeholder and multi-sectoral partnership, you will achieve more effective communication between the stakeholders. You will strengthen, that one is beautiful, strengthen institutional coordination and coordination for coherent, integrated and climate action at all levels of government. I hear the title of the toolkit. Okay, next one, please. So we have 3 questions of the action plans, and the last one is, now what actions are you going to do to make that happen? That is the simple question. What actions, objectives will achieve this goal? So what action you need to do? So you need to form a national climate council by 2026, hold quarterly interagency meetings. I love this kind of actions, integrate climate plans in 80% of sectors by 2027. I think this is a plan that is already in place because it's so specific, and launch a shared data platform accessible by all mechanisms. I think it's a wonderful example. I'm sure this is something that you are working already. Strengthening central climate governance to promote policy coherence and integrated climate planning in the Philippines. What else? What other actions you need to? Stakeholder engagement. Stakeholder engagement is very general. I would like to hear more specific how you will do that stakeholder engagement, because that is when we want to know what a specific action is. That is the general, but more details can be done. And that's how the tool gave you a lot of these insights. You will do capacity and partnership.
And extra points if you can link it to something that was discussed today.
Data information sharing. You're trying to find something that you said, Addis? Long-term plan and stakeholders and regularly monitoring progress updates. Interoperability data. Finish existing.
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
Yeah, if I have, so I haven't written it, but if I would have one thing that I personally believe it will be something around kind of the data platform, knowledge sharing platform that really kind of zones into successful examples and tries to kind of distinguish patterns on if what worked in one country setting and how it can be applied in another country setting. So really kind of like a recipe book of successful outcomes and how they can be applied in different national contexts.
Excellent. So you can pick up ideas from Addis and reach out to Addis when you're doing your planning and action plans for integrated climate action. And next one, please. So we have wonderful, now, could you describe how roles and responsibilities for climate adaptation and mitigation have been delineated among ministries? So you see, the tool is not an easy tool. You really make an assessment of how you stand. We will have a stock taking. If we talked about the stock takes in the Paris Agreement, and I think Addis was working on this very hard, that is the stock taking you have to have at country level to really reach out. So the silo mindset, yes, you need to overcome the silo mindsets based on the competencies and potential coordination. How roles and responsibilities for climate adaptation and mitigation have been delineated. Climate adaptation and mitigation roles are typically led by environmental ministry, with sectoral responsibilities shared among line ministries like agriculture, energy, finance, among others, yes. So I think I see here the leadership of one ministry, of the climate ministry. And then I see a lot of the silo mindset. This is very interesting comment we're receiving several times, silo mindset. So we need to overcome this silo mindset. And for that, we have a toolkit about changing mindsets. In reality, we have a toolkit that we can help to overcome that challenge I'm seeing there. Okay, mindsets. Yes, mindset is fundamental. And changing the mindsets also will give you different behaviors that you have to do. All the talks we are having at the United Nations, UN 2.0 about behavioral science. This is all about changing the mindsets, also changing, because you need to change the mindsets and behaviors. You have to improve your capacities. New capacities are needed in the public sector. Next one, please. I think here is very simple. How effective is the coordination? From one, you can scale up, very inefficient, very ineffective, somehow ineffective, effective or very effective. This needs some people to answer because we need many answers to get a good overview. So we need to finish very soon. I like this question very much. So there is coordination, there are mechanisms, we saw council, and now the question is how effective it is. So now you see the tool, how it works. Not big difference. It's very, how can you say? It's not only that everyone is thinking is effective or very ineffective. It's in between. You have countries where you have maybe the coordination mechanism there, but not necessarily the effectiveness is there. And this is related to the question we have about how effective is the policy coherence. So we will make sure we make a criteria on when you're going to, and this is for you, Addis, some criteria when you're going to measure effectiveness. So we have all the same scale for the measure and the same understanding to measure what's, and that's why we are piloting the toolkit. Thank you. The readiness assessment tool. Next one.
Yeah, this is very useful.
Are there mandatory legal frameworks to ensure stakeholder participation? Now we're in the stakeholder participation in the climate policy cycle. Yes, it seems like they are. They are legal frameworks that request stakeholders to participate. We need to move to the next one. And some countries we don't have. We need to analyze these points. If yes, are these stakeholder? Okay, we have the tool, we have the policy document about engagement of stakeholder. Now I wanted to understand if yes, are these stakeholder consulted, involved, how is this happening? Engage it. Because what I would like to see more is the fifth, okay, that the fifth column right now, that the stakeholders are not only informed or only consult. I want them to be engaged. Well, we want them to be engaged. And that's that question. That goes for all representatives. Yes, exactly, engaged. We see in the chat a lot of the engagement. Okay, I'm happy that engagement is going up. I hope it's not because I'm influencing your degree, but now engagement is going up and unnecessary. Should be always realistic accordingly with your situation. But I see more engagement, and I'm very happy to see that. That's what we want, that the stakeholders are not only informed. They are informed, but they are consulted and they are engaged. So it should be all of them very on the top. Next one, please. I did a lot on the action plan. Well, what overarching institutional changes are needed? No, I think you can jump this one because that was, maybe I'm repeating the same slide of before. Yeah, I think I repeated the same. Can you move on the slide? Yes, the three slides are repeated. They are repeated for the policy instruments, but we will keep it that. No, continue. Next one. I want to see, next one, please. I want to move to this slide specifically. I wanted to ask you, what did you learn today? So I want that you share 1 or 2 words about something you took away. What message are you bringing home from today's session? We are going to revise all these little words, even some there in the corner, because I think some are highlighted more because we really talk well about policy coherence, collaboration, stakeholder participation, the different global frameworks, how we are going to really strengthening the public institutions. But I will look at this slide carefully to see what you're taking away from today's session. And I hope you enjoy it and you learn about this tool, readiness assessment tool. Policy coherence, policy integration, effective collaboration. I will take a picture too.
Despite very little focus on trade-offs and incoherence and despite the framing of the presentation. So interesting.
The learning is not immediately. You need to review the PTTs and most importantly, digest, because we're giving you information in the session. So we move up, and thank you very much, and we can close this readiness assessment tool. I think it was wonderful participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. I think that was a very great way to wrap up our today's session. Your presentation was very insightful, and it was truly enriching and informative. I just quoted this from one of our participants, Nidhi Gopal. And I also would like to take this opportunity to warmly thank Dr. Adi Siebel from Stockholm Environment Institute for sharing invaluable knowledge and facilitating the activities. Adis is based in Europe, so he has been working around the clock to coordinate with us here in Korea. So thank you, Adis, for waking up so early at 4 a.m. to join this workshop and deliver such rich content. I also would like to thank our co-organizers, DRR Getty, Unitar Sifal Jeju, and also particularly huge thanks to colleagues who were actively supporting this session behind the scenes. Thank you very much. And of course, I would like to extend warm thanks to all of you for actively participating and showing interest and enthusiasm through the Mentimeter chat and also collaborating with each other and sharing information. I think there is a community of practice established here through the chat. With this, we will now move to the final part of today's session. I have the pleasure to invite Ms. Hyunju Grace Lee, Program Officer at Unitar Sifal Jeju, to provide preview of Day 3 session. Grace, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shelley, for inviting me to the floor. Now, I would like to briefly introduce Day 3 before we close. I'm Hyunju Grace Lee from University of Jeju. I'll be your moderator of Day 3. We have already passed about 2/3 of our workshop and we are heading towards our last session. This Day 3 will begin tomorrow, same time at 2:30 p.m. Korean time. The session will be about financing and implementation instruments for disaster risk reduction, climate resilience, and addressing loss and damage. The Day 3 will provide an overview of global DRR and climate finance, highlighting support for vulnerable countries through the Loss and Damage Fund. It will also explore practical tools and frameworks, including the Santiago Network and disaster tracking system, to strengthen resilience and monitoring. For this learning outcome, we invited a group of renowned experts for you. Ms. Shinja Buri and Ms. Serin Oh from the United Nations University will begin with climate risk finance for resilience impact tools and strategies. They will cover strategies for financing climate resilience and innovative approaches to risk-informed investment. Next, we will hear from Mr. Animesh Kumar of UNDRR and Ms. Carolina Fuentes Castellano from the Santiago Network. Their session, Frameworks and Mechanisms for Averting, Minimizing, and Addressing Loss and Damage, will dive into key policy frameworks and how global efforts are aligning to address this urgent issue. Finally, Ms. Iria Tuson-Kaye, with a case presentation by Mr. Manu Gupta, will walk us through assessing loss and damage for DRR financing. This session will focus on how to quantify impacts in order to unlock and target funding where it is most needed. Please remember that presentation materials for day 1 and 2 are available in the Share the Workshop folder, and you can access them anytime via the link provided here. So once again, thank you participants, speakers, and organizers for your active participation and enthusiasm shown for day 2. Then see you tomorrow. The second day of this workshop is now adjourned.
Thank you.